Hey, what's up? My name's Drew, and I'm a naval officer. I make videos about what it's like to be stationed in Japan. And a question I've been asked a lot is if Japan is racist or not. And this is coming from, my perspective. First up, I'm from a town of people so white that they built a Mormon temple there. And I'm assuming most of the people watching this are going to be my students at Morehouse. So probably have experienced a lot more racism than I ever will and have different perspectives on it. Second, this is also a topic that your experiences may vary widely or wildly, like maybe completely different than mine, right? So that I can only talk about what I've seen and my own perspective. I that may be different than yours. All right. With that being said, I think culturally, what Americans would consider racist is not considered racist in Japan. And I think a lot of this really comes from a place of ignorance than hate. Making sure I try and word this right. I don't believe the Japanese hate other people. I don't believe there's a culture of hatred. I think it's really due to the fact that it's a very isolated area. All right, there's a very like in America, there's a lot of immigrants. You meet people from other countries all the time. In Japan, there's significantly less. So the Japanese interact with people from other countries like only a little. All right, and I probably could have worded that better, but I think that's a big part of it. A lot of their depictions or ideas of people come from like Hollywood movies where characters are kind of stereotyped based on race or class or character type, right? And so a lot of what they've experienced about, like, say, Americans or like, how to word this? Like, I'll use Black Americans as an example. If you look at movies from like the 80s and 90s when crime was a lot higher, Black people were usually depicted as criminals or gang members. And that's the kind of movies that would make it like big blockbuster movies. All right, those would come over to Japan. I think that stereotype kind of stuck, along with like the rapper thing. Imagine the most, that like stereotypical Midwesterner, I almost said Middle Eastern, Midwestern guy who's like, oh, goddamn, like rap music and kids these days, rah, rah, rah. Like that kind of those videos from like the TRL MTV movie era. Um, that stuff kind of stuck in Japan. There's actually, at least when I was there, a weirdly like late 90s like basketball bling bling era fashion going on with young Japanese kids. But that depiction of black people and culture from like 30 years ago, I think kind of stuck. And if you watch movies, this has changed recently, 15, 5, 10, 15 years ago, those movies depict black people in a much different way than like they were in like the early 90s. All right. And they kind of view, that's their worldview. And that's what Japanese people see and kind of think is reality. So that's this kind of stuff that they're more willing to stereotype people. And that's the kind of things I saw. Personally, my experiences, I never really ran into outright racism of people saying like mean things to me. I did hear one like 13-year-old calling me Navy trash in Japanese because he thought I couldn't understand him. But that's just like an edgy 13-year-old kid. They're all like that everywhere in the world, right? I did run into some places where they wouldn't let me in. That was usually in Sasebo near the base, but not like in the areas where sailors would go. So either they didn't speak English, they had a bad experience with some Americans beforehand, or they just didn't like Americans. But they weren't gonna be openly like trash talking me or anything. They just said like don't enter. All right. When I was traveling a little more in the more obscure areas, usually I just got like a couple looks. Sometimes people asked me like what I was doing there, but I wasn't like disrespectful or anything, and they didn't seem to mind that I was there. They were just kind of interested. And then in the big cities like Tokyo, they didn't like bat an eye whenever I was walking around. So that's just my experiences. A lot of people may have very different experiences. I'm kind of worried about my son because I've heard a lot about how they view Hafus, half Japanese and then half of another race. And I don't know if my son's going to blend in. He does take after his mom, so maybe they'll just think he's full Japanese and he won't have to deal with it. So that's just my experiences and my thoughts. Maybe I'm completely off, or maybe your experiences are totally different. I'd love to hear about it because, like I said, I can only talk about what happened to me specifically. All right, that's all I got. Bye.